Investigations will now come to order. Without objections, the chair is authorized to declare recess of the subcommittee at any time. The subcommittee is meeting today to hear testimony on Fix Our Forests, how improved land management can protect communities in the wildland-urban interface. Under Committee Rule 4F, any oral opening statement at the hearing are limited to the chairman and the ranking member. I therefore ask unanimous consent that all the other members' statements be made part of the hearing record if they are submitted in accordance with Committee Rule 3.0. Without objection, so ordered. I ask unanimous consent that the following members be allowed to sit and participate in today's hearing. The gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Tiffany. The gentleman from Idaho, Mr. Fulcher. The gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Hageman. The gentleman from Utah, Mr. Kennedy. The gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Crane. The gentleman from California, Mr. Fong. The gentlewoman from California, Ms. Kim. The gentleman from California, Mr. Calvert. Without objection, so ordered. I recognize the full committee. Is Bruce going to speak? Okay, I can hear. Okay. I'll now recognize myself for my opening statement. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for our witnesses who came today to testify on this important issue on Fix Our Forests, how improved land management can protect communities in the wildland-urban interface. The Committee on Natural Resources and I have worked tirelessly to emphasize and combat the catastrophic wildfire crisis in the United States. I have long advocated for implementing sound science-backed forest management policies, putting people back to work in our national forests, encouraging coordination between federal, state, and private entities related to managing our forest, and to improve public safety, especially in the wildland-urban interface. I will never forget the Yarnell Hill Fire, which tragically took the lives of 19 Granite Mountain hotshot firefighters and remains Arizona's deadliest wildfire. The Yarnell Fire ignited on federal BLM before burning more than 8,300 acres and destroying almost 100 homes in nearby neighborhoods. The public memorial I hosted brought together more than 1,200 members of the community, and the sacrifice of each firefighter who was taken from us all too soon has undoubtedly stayed with all of us. We must not allow these tragedies that wildfires bring to wildland-urban interface communities to continue. The relationship between forest management and the wildfire crisis is clear. Across the U.S., more than 1 billion acres of land are at risk of being consumed by wildfire. Of those, approximately 117 million acres owned by the federal government has been identified as high or very high risk of burning. And over the last 20 years, wildfires in the United States have burned an average of 7 million acres per year. In 2024, almost 9 million acres burned. These numbers have multiplied significantly, even those from seen as recently as the early 2000s. And the reason why is not difficult to understand. Across the country, our nation's forests are loaded with dangerous dry fuels and have been not managed through the thinning, prescribed burns, and mechanized treatments. Hundreds of years ago, forests in the United States held about 64 acres per acre. Now, in many places, those same forests hold upwards of 300 trees per acre, allowing extreme environments to lock up our forests and make forests less resilient by increasing competition among trees and other vegetation for water, minerals, and sunlight, crucial to sustain forest health. To be clear, the catastrophic wildfire crisis does not only impact our forests. This crisis poses perhaps the most significant threat to communities situated in the wildland-urban interface. Wildfires cost between $394 billion and $893 billion every year. These costs include property damage, lost income, contamination of water resources, timber loss, and more. Worse yet, these impacted home and business owners face significant challenge keeping property insurance that covers losses due to wildfire. We'll talk about that today. As costs for both property owners and insurance carriers balloon, some carriers cannot insure high-risk communities or properties. And those people who cannot obtain or can't obtain insurance often find their rates are astronomically increased. So they are underinsured when they are unfortunately must file a claim after experiencing a wildfire loss. Only by putting out the fire, that is a more than century-long campaign by preservation activists who do not understand forest management, can we reduce the impact of wildfires and allow our forests to thrive. In fact, evidence of sound management policies working can be seen in my home state of Arizona. For example, in 2024 alone, the Forest Restoration Initiative, which is a collaborative effort between federal, state, and local stakeholders, has successfully treated more than 200,000 acres with beneficial fire and thinning. The project has not only helped lessen the impacts of catastrophic fire, but also simultaneously boosted forest and watershed health and helped sustain Arizona's timber industry. Together, we must do more to unlock these projects in other parts of Arizona and across the country. In 2013, I championed the Catastrophic Wildfire Prevention Act, which served to revamp the federal government's ability to partner with private industry and state foresters to manage and restore our wildlands and to cut the bureaucratic red tape that too often blocks at implementing sound policy decisions. This year, I proudly voted alongside many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to pass the Fix Our Forests Act, which, among other things, streamlines the permitting process for critical forest management projects, continues to foster relationships among federal, state, tribal, and local entities, and ends frivolous litigation that stands in the way of making communities in the wildland-urban interface more resilient to wildfire. I challenge my colleagues in this room to think not only about these issues facing our forest and wildland interface communities, but also about the science-based solutions presented by proactive forest management projects. These projects, coupled with community and home safety strategies, will both encourage insurers to cover at-risk residents more affordably and holistically, and to help prevent devastating losses in the first place. I look forward to a robust discussion today on how we can protect our wildland-urban interface communities and our forests through proper management. Thank you, and I now recognize the Ranking Member Dexter for her opening statements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Wildfire has always been a natural part of ecosystems across the country, helping to sustain biodiversity and forest health. But what we're facing now is different. Wildfires are burning hotter, faster, and more unpredictably than ever, putting lives and entire communities at risk. This isn't an abstract problem. It's a crisis, and we know all too well this crisis in Oregon. We've seen entire neighborhoods reduced to ash, hazardous smoke choking our skies, and families forced to flee with nothing but what they could carry. And it's not just the flames we have to worry about. A 2025 study found that between 2006 and 2020, smoke from climate-fueled wildfires was responsible for approximately 15,000 deaths in the United States. Vulnerable groups, such as children, older adults, pregnant people, and those who work outdoors are especially at risk. The science is clear. Climate change is driving this crisis. It's increasing average temperatures, drying out vegetation, extending fire seasons, and contributing to pest and disease outbreaks that weaken forest health and increase flammability. Nearly 1/4 of the contiguous United States is at moderate to very high risk of wildfire. This isn't just a Western problem. More than 1,100 communities across 32 states share wildfire risk characteristics with Los Angeles and other areas that have recently experienced devastating urban wildfires. In fact, 1/3 of all homes in the United States are in the Wildland-Urban interface, or WUI. These are places where homes and infrastructure meet undeveloped natural areas. That means millions of families are at risk, not just from wildfires themselves, but also from toxic smoke, displacement, and economic devastation. Some of the most catastrophic fire disasters in recent memory, the Pacific Palisades fire in California, the Lahaina fire in Hawaii in 2023, the Marshall fire in Colorado in 2021, and the Alameda Drive fire in Oregon in 2020, all share key features. Their triggers likely involved human activity, they occurred near developed areas, and they were fueled by extreme wind events. If we neglect the built environment, communities will continue to be vulnerable regardless of how well we manage forests. We cannot keep repeating the same mistakes. We need proactive solutions like Zone Zero policies that prohibit combustible materials such as brush, mulch, wooden fences, sheds, or outdoor furniture within 5 feet of structures. At the same time, we must encourage home hardening techniques, including the use of fire-resistant roofing, ember-resistant vent and eave covers, and non-flammable exterior walls and siding. Studies show that the cost of constructing a fire-resilient home is nearly the same as a conventional constructed home. Yet widespread adoption of these practices has been impeded by bureaucracy, limited resources, weak enforcement, and misinformation. The growing impact of urban wildfires is also disrupting the home insurance market. Between 2020 and 2023, homeowners saw insurance premiums increase by an average of 13% nationwide due to climate-related disasters. In California alone, 4 of the 5 most expensive wildfires on record occurred between 2018 and 2022, causing major insurers to stop issuing new home insurance policies in the state. A 2021 study found that applying ecological forestry practices to appropriate areas could lead to a 41% drop in residential insurance premiums and save $21 million per year in reduced insurance losses. Science-based practices like prescribed burning, selective thinning, and maintaining strategic fuel breaks have also proven effective in lowering wildfire risk. But we must also confront what doesn't work. Policies that prioritize corporate profits over public safety, gut environmental protections, or ignore the root cause of these megafires. In March, President Trump issued 2 executive orders expanding commercial logging on public lands. Logging operations that often leave behind flammable debris and remove large fire-resistant trees are making forests more vulnerable to catastrophic fire, not less. Annually, less than 1% of wildfires intersect with Forest Service-treated fuel reduction zones, indicating that timber harvests are not an effective metric for saving our forests. And let's be clear, the Trump administration's cut to key wildfire prevention offices have also severely weakened our ability to prepare for and respond to fires. Hundreds of federal firefighters were laid off in February, and some of them are hired back, but the broader loss of foresters, scientists, and natural resource managers mean we won't have the interdisciplinary workforce we need to fight wildfires. We have many great things to discuss today. I'm excited to hear some of the amazing, innovative ideas happening out there, but we must meet this moment. We need a comprehensive science-based wildfire strategy. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
I thank the ranking member. Now the chairman for the full committee is now recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Gosar, and appreciate you holding this hearing today, a very important hearing, and thank you to our esteemed panel of witnesses. I think this is a topic that gets far too little attention, and we need to shine a light on the other side of what's happening in these devastating wildfires. Just a few short months ago, the whole world watched in horror as raging infernos leveled entire neighborhoods in Los Angeles. These fires destroyed more than 16,200 buildings and caused $131 billion in direct property damages. But these statistics only tell part of the story and never can fully encapsulate the toll that devastating wildfires have on the thousands of families that are still trying to pick up the pieces and return to any semblance of normalcy. We cannot become numb to this level of destruction year after year. We can and we should do more. I would say we must do more. As we sit here today and we think about those 16,200 homes that were destroyed, there are more than 44 million homes in the wildland-urban interface at risk of these kinds of wildfires across our country. This should be a top priority for every American, especially those out west where the fires seem to be more frequent and of higher magnitude. And the thing that we're going to talk about a lot today is how insurance rates are skyrocketing in fire-prone communities. And that is if folks are even able to buy policies in the first place. Just this week, the state of California approved a 17% increase in state farm insurance premiums due to wildfires, on top of increases homeowners have already faced over the past few years. There's a direct connection to lack of forest management and the cost of insurance in these communities. This problem is quite literally killing the American dream, making owning a home unattainable for millions of families. Even worse, without insurance, many folks affected by wildfires can't afford to rebuild their homes, meaning some communities will quite literally never look the same again. The good news is that we know what needs to be done, and it requires using every tool at our disposal. This means hardening homes and infrastructure, creating more defensible space around communities, and treating our forests so they aren't tinderboxes ready to explode at the strike of a single match. That's why the Bipartisan Fix Our Forest Act, which overwhelmingly passed the House earlier this year, comprehensively addresses this crisis by providing new tools and authorities to prevent wildfires at both a community and a landscape level. Wildfire is fast and bureaucracy is slow. Take, for example, the Angeles National Forest, which burned as part of the Eaton Fire. In 2020, federal land managers wanted to install roughly 8,600 acres of fuel breaks and began conducting an environmental assessment. Due to delays, the Forest Service eventually split this project into 3 separate categorical exclusions. After nearly 4 years of delays, these categorical exclusions were finally approved weeks after the Eaton Fire. Too late to make a difference to the residents of Pasadena and Altadena. Had FOFA been in place in 2020, this project could have taken place under one 10,000-acre categorical exclusion. FOFA also codifies existing emergency authorities, shortening the time frame for action from 4 years to right now. We know that this works. Look no further than South Lake Tahoe, which was saved from certain destruction by forest management treatments that happened under a 10,000-acre categorical exclusion. Now we need to take that model and apply it nationwide. As a forester, I can say that one of the favorite sayings of a forester is that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. The best time to have these authorities in place was years before the LA fires ever occurred. But the second best time is to enact these reforms now so that communities in the future don't have to suffer the same consequences that we saw there in Southern California. I really look forward to hearing the testimony today and continuing work in a bipartisan fashion with my colleagues to improve forest management and protect communities. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentleman from Arkansas, the gentleman from California, the ranking member for the whole committee. Mr. Huffman is recognized for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our witnesses. So when I heard that House Republicans were calling this hearing on wildfire preparedness and response, I was encouraged because I agree with the chairman and others. This is an important conversation. Catastrophic wildfires continue to tear through our communities. Today, fires are burning from Arizona to Minnesota, and it's early in the season. This committee is the place for a serious solutions-focused conversation about building wildfire resilience. But I am disappointed that once again, instead of confronting the full scope of the wildfire crisis or focusing on the most pressing science-based solutions and urgently needed investments in the built environment so we can actually protect communities, we seem to be having yet another hearing on a bill that's already passed this committee and already passed the House of Representatives. Now, Fix Our Forests has some good stuff in it. I acknowledge that. It also had some bad things in it that didn't need to be there, that were masquerading as fire solutions. But whether you think it's great or needs improvement, I don't think anyone seriously believes that it is the exhaustive and definitive statement of everything we need to do on this subject. But it seems to be the only thing that our friends across the aisle want to talk about. Look, if we're going to address this crisis seriously, we need a full accounting of the threats and the tools to confront it. And that really starts at the top with an acknowledgement that wildfires are burning hotter and faster and longer because of climate change. We've got to acknowledge this reality. Fire professionals who I have met with who have fought fires all over the West, they don't dispute it. They don't think it's a hoax or a conspiracy theory. They know climate change is a reality. So let's acknowledge that and also maybe stop making it worse, as our Republican colleagues are trying to do with the fossil fuel bonanza in their reconciliation bill. Look, fires are no longer just a problem for the West. Recent fires in Florida, Texas, and Arkansas are evidence that this has become a national crisis. Of course, we have fires in northern Minnesota burning today. Wildfires are also increasingly an urban issue, as the ranking member noted. Without major investments in home hardening and defensible spaces, communities will continue to be at risk no matter what we do in the backcountry, in the deep areas of our forests. We can't address these problems if we're not willing to invest the necessary funding and resources too. And that's why I am encouraged that our colleagues in the Senate seem to be making some improvements in the Fix Our Forest Act by incorporating many of these critical priorities that I'm mentioning. Now, that includes components of my Community Protection and Wildfire Resilience Act, which is a bipartisan bill that I was proud to recently reintroduce with Representative Obernolte in this Congress. It will help communities implement science-based wildfire mitigation strategies, provide crucial funding to design and implement new community protection and wildfire resilience plans with community members, first responders, and state agencies, and build on the investments that Democrats secured through the IIJA and the IRA. Now, these investments have allowed the Forest Service to do some very important things. They've hit record numbers for both hazardous fuel reductions and prescribed burns, increased the pace and scale of forest health treatments, provided important resources to strengthen and empower our wildland firefighting workforce. We were moving in the right direction, but unfortunately, this progress has come to a screeching halt under the Trump administration. The experts and models tell us that we are headed into an especially active fire season, but Elon Musk and Doge have been gutting the agencies responsible for keeping our communities safe from fire at a time when we need them the most. At least 700 dedicated public servants at the Forest Service who support federal firefighting have been fired, and we know that more firings are coming. FEMA has lost a third of its full-time staff, including those specifically responsible for fire management. And Donald Trump has called for the elimination of FEMA entirely, which would eliminate the federal recovery help that comes with us. In a move that defies logic, the administration has blocked funding for projects that prevent wildfires. With community wildfire defense grants blocked, vital wildfire mitigation projects have been stopped, and that makes us more vulnerable. So I would hope that my Republican friends would want to do something about that instead of spending all our time talking about a bill that has already passed this committee and already passed the House. Wildfires are not partisan, but unfortunately our policies and our preparedness efforts too often seem to be, and that needs to change. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We're now going to go to our witnesses. I'll introduce us and then we'll start. So the first one is Mr. Dan Munsey, the Fire Chief and Fire Warden, San Bernardino County, Fire Protection District, San Bernardino, California. Next is Mr. Matt Weiner. Did I say it right? Yes. CEO, Megafire Action, Los Angeles, California. Mr. Neil Chapman, Wildfire and Fire Captain, Flagstaff Fire Department, Flagstaff, Arizona. Thank you. And Mr. Roy Wright, President and CEO, Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, Richburg, South Carolina. Let me remind the witnesses that under committee rules, you must limit your statement to 5 minutes, but your whole entire statement will be placed in the record. So if you want to talk about something else, that's great. To begin your testimony, you'll see a green light go on. At 4 minutes, will turn yellow, and then you start wrap up when you see the red light. So with that, I now recognize Mr. Munsey for his 5 minutes.
Dr. Gosar, first, thank you for your comments on the Yarnell fire and specifically about recognizing the firefighters that lost their life while protecting our communities. My badge is shrouded, and since I know this will be congressional record, I'd like to recognize firefighter Ryan Spandrio, who recently passed from San Bernardino County Fire District, leaving behind a wife and 2 young children. The lies we tell, I'd like to start there. First, that this nation has a large wildfire problem, wildland fire problem. I don't believe that the nation has a large wildland fire, and it may be shocking, but let me explain. Our problem is that we have a wildland management problem, and if we manage our fuels, we won't have the fires that we see today. Wildfires are the byproduct of not effectively managing our wildland environment. The second, I notice I'm sitting next to Mr. Wright from the insurance industry, and we hear often about the fire insurance crisis. The number one question that I get, and thank you, Mr. Westman, for your comments on this, the number one question I get as a fire chief anymore is, Chief, what are you doing to prevent this insurance crisis? I can't get insurance. I'm on the California Fair Plan. That plan's not fair. It's very expensive. At the end of the day, it's not an insurance crisis problem. It's a houses keep burning down problem. And so I appreciate your comments, Mrs. Dexter, on how do we, did I get your name right? My apologies, my eyesight's not that good. I appreciate your comments on the local responsibility, ensuring that we are protecting that built environment. But we really need to focus on why do these fires occur and why do we keep losing houses? A third lie that I think we tell is we keep referring to 2 large wildfires that occurred recently in Los Angeles, the Eaton Fire and the Palisades Fire. Make no mistake about it, there was a wildfire component to it, but this was house-to-house burning. These are houses that are burning because of failure from local government in making sure that our houses aren't going to burn down and making sure that private properties are managing the land. Zone 0 is very important to us in this built environment. I've asked for several pictures to be brought up because I do want to talk about land management. This first picture I showed to a couple of congressional members recently, but specifically to Lamalfa. I asked him about those cars that are in the foreground. And he's a car enthusiast, and I asked him what year are those cars, and he said, well, Chief, those are 1930s. This is the San Bernardino National Forest in 1930s. And I said, well, sir, it's not about the cars in the foreground. It's look at that hillside. And that hillside has strong control lines. Every ridge has a control line on it. There's good access. This is how we fought fires in the 1930s. This is why we kept it small. Next picture, please. And this is 4 days ago, looking at that same area. There's been a species-type conversion because of bad management processes. There's no access into this area. There's no control lines. When fires start, they're going to spread and they're going to come to our communities. Now I'm going to shift the photo to the left. Next photo. That same prominent hill is now on the right side of the photo, but to the left, you really can't see it in that valley. You'll see some roads that are now there. That's all burned from the line fire. Line fire occurred this past August in San Bernardino, burned 50,000 acres. We had to evacuate about 50,000 people. Those control lines were put in after the fact. It makes no sense to me that we have to go to the environment after a fire to make access, after the fire, during the fire to put these control lines. Why aren't we proactively managing? We speak often of the Eaton fire, and the Eaton fire was bad, but that same year, the bridge fire burned. It burned from Los Angeles, came into San Bernardino, threatened two of our communities, Mount Baldy and the community of Wrightwood. The photo on the left shows what good management looks like. This is a shaded fuel break. The fire on the right, now the fire burned 32,000 acres in one day, 34,000 acres in one day. The bridge fire burned. But as it reached this area that had been treated, it went to the ground, and firefighters were able to pick this up with a couple of scratch lights, a couple of hand lines, but it allowed us to control that fire. Next slide, please. This is the bark beetle kill from 2003 in the San Bernardino National Forest. The final thing I want to make is that as we move through the regulatory environment, we lack leadership. There's federal agencies, there's overlay agencies like the EPA, Department Corps of Engineers, there's state and local government. The way we were able to mitigate this is by our local government taking actions and bringing these parties together. We removed 1 million trees, millions of pounds of biomass to remove these trees. The federal government needs one person in charge of land management instead of us having to go through a very difficult regulatory practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. I now recognize Mr. Wright for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Gosar, Ranking Member Dixter, Chairman Westerman, and Ranking Member Huffman, and all the members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. My name is Roy Wright, and I lead the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. We're supported by investments from the property insurance industry. IBHS is a research organization dedicated to making homes, businesses, and communities safer from the impacts of severe weather and disasters. Our goal, make American homes and communities more survivable and insurable. Survivable, I mean homes and communities that can endure the severe weather events that we know are coming, allowing families to return to normal life more quickly. And by insurable, I mean simply homes and communities that carriers want to insure, not through guarantees, but by making them more attractive risk through smart mitigation. Over the past decade, wildfire has become one of the critical perils we study at the IBHS Research Center. Our facility has the unique ability to pummel full-size buildings and components to realistic thermal exposure of flames as well as flying embers. This capability has given us new insights into the vulnerabilities of homes to embers, flames, and heat of wildfire, as well as the dynamics of building-to-building fire spread we see in the context of urban conflagrations. Our focus at IBHS is on that transition of fire from the wildlands into developed neighborhoods. These dynamics were on full display earlier this year during the Los Angeles County fires. They grimly remind us of what can occur when fire, wind, and our neighborhoods come together without the right mitigation actions in place. The needed actions, though, are not complicated. To reduce the risk of home ignition from embers, homeowners, they need a Class A roof, use ember-resistant vents for attics and crawl spaces, and must clear combustible material 5 feet away from around the home. To reduce the risk of ignitions from flame and radiant heat, we look to the building material choices like windows, doors, siding, and decking. And at the neighborhood scale, focus on the spacing between structures and the removal of the connective fuels. These are essential to prevent fire from moving from one home to another. These mitigation elements form the foundation of IBHS's Wildfire Prepared Program, which offers solutions at the home and neighborhood scale. A compelling example of this approach is the Dixon Trail community near San Diego. Developed by KB Home, all 64 homes in this new neighborhood are being built to our Wildfire Prepared Home Plus standard. The development also incorporates neighborhood scale risk reduction strategies. These actions require almost cost-neutral choices in the building materials. For KB, the homes are easier to insure and therefore easier to sell. We need more neighborhoods like Dixon Trail and fewer communities that face the difficult journey of recovering and rebuilding. Just as mitigation actions to reduce property-level wildfire risk must be undertaken collectively, so too must the actions of federal, state, and local policymakers to assist homeowners. We see 4 key policy pathways. 1, address the fuel loads in the wildland. Across federal, state, and private lands, narrow the pathways of destruction. 2, appropriately tailored financial incentives and support mechanisms that can help homeowners invest in meaningful wildfire resilience. The tax incentives, grant programs, and disaster savings accounts can all help. The bipartisan Fix Our Forests Act, already passed by the House, would establish a community wildfire risk reduction program to help communities prepare for fire and harden structures against wildfire. 3, consistent messaging about wildfire risk reduction, especially the critical actions about removing all that is flammable within 5 feet up next to the structures. We need to educate homeowners, business owners, and communities. And 4th, something that's quintessentially at the state and local level, stronger codes and standards for building a defensible space. They play a very critical role. We know how to make our homes and communities more survivable and insurable. Translating this knowledge into action requires policies that drive consumer behavior, incentivize resilient retrofits, and catalyze the innovation in mind of the private sector. We appreciate the opportunity to share some of these ideas with you today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. And now I recognize Mr. Chapman from Flagstaff. We'd like to hear your 5 minutes.
Chair Gosar, Ranking Member Dexter, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Neil Chapman. I'm a wildland fire captain with the City of Flagstaff Fire Department in northern Arizona. I've worked in fire for over 20 years. I'm a qualified engine boss and have deployed on fire assignments from Texas to Montana. I'm also a former member of the congressionally chartered Wildland Fire Mitigation and Management Commission, which provided one of the most comprehensive roadmaps of policy solutions to date for the wildfire crisis. The Fix Our Forest Act includes many commission recommendations, with the Senate version touching on a third of the recommendations in the final report. The City of Flagstaff Fire Department has been a leader in wildfire risk reduction for 30 years, and it illustrates the important role that local fire departments and districts can play in supporting the aggressive operational tempo necessary for comprehensive community risk reduction. In 2012, Flagstaff voters approved a $10 million bond to support the Flagstaff Watershed Protection Project, a unique partnership between the Flagstaff Fire Department, the state of Arizona, and the Coconino National Forest. This local investment has leveraged over $40 million in partner contributions and allowed the fire department to engage in risk reduction actions across both the built and natural environments. One of our most important built environment initiatives is our Clean Air program. We have distributed over 450 HEPA-rated air purifiers and are developing plans to transform community buildings into clean air hubs. We have established a network of indoor and outdoor air quality monitoring stations. Our message is simple: no one should be subjected to low-quality indoor air due to beneficial fire management practices. The Commission recognizes this connection between public health and beneficial fire. that it's inseparable, and that with sustained investment and increased cooperation, we can work together to promote these mutual objectives. While FOFA does not authorize additional funding, it does empower the proposed Fire Intelligence Center to support air quality monitoring programs. Additionally, the Senate version includes important direction to enable the exceptional events pathway of the Clean Air Act to streamline prescribed burn permitting, a necessary step in reducing fire risk. The Forest Restoration Initiative, or FORFRI, a landscape-scale effort to reduce wildfire risk across the 4 forests of northern Arizona, was formed nearly 15 years ago with the support of the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program. FORFRI's 2.4 million acre NEPA process was completed without litigation and is now an example of how it can be done. The FORFRI forests are leading in prescribed fire acres accomplished in the West, and the Coconino National Forest has been a top 5 timber-producing forest for 2 years in a row. We have demonstrated that a robust NEPA process can provide positive signals to the timber industry that acres will be made available. The Senate version of FOFA expands on post-NEPA implementation strategies that have worked well within FORFRI, like shared stewardship agreements. It also includes a more robust community wildfire risk reduction program, an essential program for built environment solutions, with a pathway for input from non-federal experts like myself. It is critical that we recognize our wildfire workforce is drawn from local, state, tribal, and federal entities. Non-federal wildland fire staff are first responders on about 80% of wildfires, regardless of the jurisdiction. U.S. Fire Administration statistics indicate that nearly 18,000 fire departments and districts across this country engage in wildfire response. Support for our workforce, our entire workforce, is critical to providing effective wildfire risk reduction. A significant driver of the wildfire crisis facing communities like Flagstaff is over a century of land management strategies based on wildfire suppression and exclusion. While constant improvement in wildfire response is a natural and important part of our fire service culture, reactive strategies alone do not provide an appropriate level of service to our communities. For time immemorial, people have used beneficial fire intentionally to steward the land, strengthen communities, and reduce wildfire risk. We can find this balance again. A culture shift based on proactive risk reduction is needed to draw down the long-term costs of wildfire. The Flagstaff Fire Department, along with our local, state, and federal partners, protect Flagstaff with fire, not just from fire. The Flagstaff Fire Department stands ready to help support the implementation of wildland and committed federal partners. Chair Gosar, Ranking Member Dexter, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Now, Mr. Weiner, it's your turn for 5 minutes.
Chairman Gosar, Ranking Member Dexter, thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Matt Weiner. I'm the CEO and founder of Megafire Action. We are a nonprofit founded on a simple premise. Megafire is solvable, and therefore we need to be doing a lot more to address it. As we saw in January, the megafire crisis is continuing to accelerate, with fires starting in the wildland, often creeping into the built environment with catastrophic effect. Our systems are being overwhelmed at every level. The Fix Our Forest Act is a really important place to start. This is a nonpartisan emergency that requires a bipartisan response, and we were happy to see that bill move through the House earlier this year. At its core, the Fix Our Forest Act tackles 3 key challenges: community wildfire resilience, permitting reform, and technology adoption for improved decision-making, all essential to make up an effective wildfire mitigation work in the WUI and beyond. Let me start with permitting reform. We all know that selective thinning, fuel breaks, and prescribed fire can restore ecosystem balance and reduce risk, yet we're nowhere near meeting the scale needed. Last year, the Forest Service treated 800,000 acres of the highest risk landscapes, a record high, but still far short of the millions needed to reach our targets. One major barrier is the slow and costly permitting process. The Forest Service estimates that planning and assessments consume 40% of total direct work and can frequently lead to years of delays. I want to note that there are very legitimate reasons to be concerned about changes to NEPA and environmental laws in this regard. Lessons forged in the timber wars will not and should not be easily forgotten, but the facts on the ground have changed and our laws need to change to reflect that. And we've seen that cutting red tape can get results. As the chairman mentioned, the 10,000 acre categorical exclusions for fuels reduction in the Lake Tahoe Basin sped up treatment, helping halt the Caldor fire before it reached South Lake Tahoe. After losing 20% of the world's giant sequoias to wildfires, the Forest Service expedited NEPA review in 2022, enabling the Giant Sequoia Lands Coalition to treat 54% of groves within just the past few years. While much of the conversation around permitting reform is centered on landscape-scale fuels treatments in forested environments, fuel break projects in the WUI face similar delays. The chairman noted that the Angeles National Forest, where the deadly Eaton fire broke out, had severe permitting delays in being able to implement its fuel break plan. I won't go back into the story because he's told it better than I could. But the fact that red tape held up our progress on being able to do something there is unacceptable. A company we work with named Vibrant Planet found that $9 million in mitigation work in this area could have protected $40 billion in assets, and yet we weren't able to get the job done in time. If FOFA had been law, the project could have been implemented under one categorical exclusion in 6 months instead of 4 years. When it comes to the built environment, we know how to build communities that are more resilient to megafire, and yet there isn't a single region in the country that is getting this right. Research shows that home hardening, zone zero, and defensible space can increase a home survival rate by over 40%. Yet creating and maintaining ember-resistant homes and landscaping in high-risk areas remains underemphasized in federal policy. For instance, the Community Wildfire Defense Grant Program cannot currently support home hardening projects. The Senate version of FOFA would address this problem by allowing new uses for the Community Wildfire Defense Program. And once that is passed, Congress should consider increasing funding for this program to ensure that FOFA's reforms can lead to results. The bill also establishes the Community Wildfire Risk Reduction Program, inspired by Recommendation 1 from the Wildfire Commission. This program is designed to improve interagency coordination and provide communities with the resources needed to reduce wildfire risk. Over the last several years, we've seen an explosion of technology companies offering solutions at every phase of fire. This isn't a hypothetical pie-in-the-sky thing here. Scalable technology already exists to make taxpayer-funded programs more effective. And yet, those tools remain fragmented across more than 50 federal programs with strained budgets, leaving the government unable to effectively deploy tech for those who need it most when they need it most. The Fix Our Forest Act addresses this by creating a fireshed center to improve wildfire decision-making across prevention, suppression, and recovery. There's currently no single entity in the United States responsible for evaluating, understanding, and acting on risk across landscapes and jurisdictions. Like a combat support agency, this center will integrate real-time intelligence, predictive modeling, and risk assessments to support firefighters, land managers, and communities. And I should note that insurance companies have access to the most advanced modeling here, but our community leaders do not. And that puts them at a disadvantage when it comes to designing communities that can actually be resilient to fire.
Thank you, Mr. Weiner.
In conclusion, the Fix Our Forest Act will move the federal government towards a more proactive, science-based approach to wildfire management. The bipartisan effort led by Chairman Westerman and Representative Peters has produced a solid product with a real shot at becoming law this year. I just want to note the comments by Ranking Member Huffman. It is true that we cannot fix our forests if we do not fund these programs and we do not implement this law. But I think conversely, it's important to note that we could get all the funding we needed tomorrow and we would not be able to get the job done without these authorities. So this is an important step that we need to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weiner. We're now going to go to the gentleman from Alaska, Mr. Begich, for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First question here to Chief Munsey. One of the key Alaska wins in this bill is the formal authority for tribal and state governments to enter into shared stewardship agreements that cross jurisdictional lines. That's a game changer for places like rural Alaska where multiple entities manage a single fire-prone landscape. How important is this type of intergovernmental coordination for getting work done quickly on the ground in your view?
Sir, it's of critical importance. End of statement. Let me expand. This year, I've had our Board of Supervisors allocate $500,000 simply for a study of how we bring federal, state, tribal, local governments together to first decide on what good looks like in an interagency fashion. Often, we see siloed efforts within the CEs that may be granted. Some of this is tied up with legislation, but it's a patchwork quilt that's not very well stitched together. So the first would be to bring those parties together to decide what good looks like. The second part of that study will look at the regulatory environment. What I'm very hopeful or hopeful for is that with a bill like the Fix Our Forest, that we're able to bring the technology where we can create a one-stop shop for agencies to move through the permit process to understand this regulatory environment. The third portion of this study is to find out what funding is needed today to completely protect our county, again, jurisdictionless. The fourth is the maintenance of the work that we do. What's the maintenance schedule? And this is critical because often we do these fuel projects, but then a couple of years go by, 7, 8, 9, 10, and they're erased, like the picture I showed from the 1930s. The final stage is what is the maintenance dollars that need to be set aside on an annual basis to make sure that the efforts that we do today are sustainable in the future.
Thank you. Additional question, and this I'll open up for anyone who'd like to answer. Another Alaska win in the bill is the Fire Shed Registry, a public map showing what areas have been treated, what projects are in the pipeline, and how well they're working. As someone, as folks who are focused on public accountability, how do you see this kind of tool changing the game for communities trying to understand where their risk and progress really stands?
Let me hop on that one real quick. We use a common operating picture of the Angeles National Forest, the San Bernardino National Forest. The Angeles National Forest was where the Eaton Fire Palisades were burning. San Bernardino National Forest, both are in our jurisdiction. San Bernardino is the most heavily recreated and lived in forest. We work with both of those agencies closely, but there is no common operating picture that allows us to share what our fuel management efforts are. So this year, we're paying $250,000 for that common operating picture because the federal government agencies lack the ability to adopt technology. So we pay for them to use this technology so that we can congruently plan for the future.
Anyone else like to weigh in on that?
I was going to jump in on that, but that was pretty good. I would just say that this is really helpful from a prioritization standpoint, but also really necessary from an accountability standpoint. We don't have a really good grasp of what we're doing on the ground right now across jurisdictions, and that's a huge problem.
Thank you very much. And I will yield the balance of my time, Mr. Chair.
You want to yield that time to me?
I will yield the balance of my time to you, Mr. Chair.
I will yield the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Hagerman.
Well, thank you, and I very much appreciate you having this hearing. I think it's incredibly important. And Mr. Chief Munsey, what you said at the beginning is so critical if we're actually going to have accountability and have the ability to properly manage and protect these resources. There are an awful lot of lies out there, and I'm going to have an opportunity to ask some additional questions. But there's a few things that I think everybody in this room ought to understand. In 2001, on January 12th, Bill Clinton, on his way out of office, adopted the roadless rule. It denied access, management, and use to 58.5 million acres of National Forest Service lands. And that is the reason why we're here today and why we have the crisis on our hands related to management of our national forests and the catastrophic forest fires and beetle outbreak that we have seen over the last 25 years. I'll just give you one example. In 1997, there was a blowdown in Wright National Forest, knocked down 13,000 acres of trees in one night. Because the Forest Service, because that was a roadless area and partially a wilderness area, the Forest Service would not allow anyone to go in there and treat. All you need to do is look at Landsats. All you need to do is look at aerial photography, color infrareds, and you can watch as that pine beetle outbreak emanated outward from there. That's not because of global warming. That's not because of climate change. That is because of bad forest management and the roadless rule. That's the reason why our forests have been devastated, because of the roadless rule and bad policies coming out of Washington, D.C. And if you're unwilling to recognize that, we're never going to be able to fix our forests. We're never going to be able to protect these resources. So you're absolutely right. Until we're honest about what has happened in our national forests, we're not going to protect this resource. With that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. The gentlewoman from Arizona, Ms. Ansari, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to first start by thanking our witnesses for being here today, especially Captain Chapman, who does such important work in my home state of Arizona. Arizona is on the front lines of the nation's forest management challenges. Our wildfire seasons are becoming increasingly severe, more frequent, more intense, and more destructive due to the climate crisis. Currently, the Bryce Fire in southeastern Arizona has already scorched nearly 3,000 acres. At the same time, the Coyote Fire in northeastern Arizona, near the New Mexico border, has burned close to 1,200 acres. This highlights just how important it is that we ensure our wildfire prevention teams have the resources they need to adequately prepare for and respond to wildfire season. Unfortunately, instead of strengthening these efforts, DOGE and the Trump administration have cut critical fire prevention programs, fired thousands of workers that prepare for and respond to wildfires around the country, and imposed a federal hiring freeze that could significantly hamper operations during peak fire season. That is why earlier this year, I sent a letter to the Trump administration expressing urgent concern about the potential impact of the current federal hiring freeze on the Forest Service's seasonal wildland firefighting workforce in Arizona. The seasonal firefighters employed by the Forest Service protect our communities, our infrastructure, and our public lands during the wildfire season. The uncertainty surrounding this year's hiring process threatens to leave the agency dangerously understaffed at a critical time. Captain Chapman, as of September of last year, the Biden administration allocated $60 million to Arizona for wildfire mitigation and recovery under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. This funding was for things like fuel management projects, prescribed fires, firefighter training, and wildfire science. I want to ask you about how your ability to fight fires will be impacted if Elon Musk and DOGE take this funding away from our state. What would happen, Mr. Captain Chapman, if you lost millions of dollars for fuel management projects?
Thank you for the question. Really, we like to think about fighting the fire before the fire starts. Our fire's local, and so in our area, we can really do a good job restoring the natural structure and pattern of our ponderosa pine forest. That keeps the fire on the ground. When the fire is on the ground, we can actually engage that fire. We can get in front of that fire. Tools, trucks, people do a really good job when the fire is on the ground. We can't do a whole lot when the fire is in the trees. So keeping that fire on the ground is really important for us. And the way we do that is really something that's grown to be called the Flagstaff model. And that's a locally driven collaborative process to treat our lands around the community, whether it's private lands, whether it's city lands, whether it's state or federal. We're pretty successful at getting that money and putting it into the ground, into these treatments. And so anytime we see a reduction in capacity to implement these fuel reduction treatments, it makes it harder to protect our community. So it's not just implementing that treatment, but it's also, as we've heard, maintaining those treatments as well. So our timber industry is growing in our area. Investments into that industry are very important, and maintaining that stability to give that struggling timber industry the assurance that investments in our area are a smart thing for them is very important for our communities. And then that ties into the built environment investments as well. And so working with our partners here at IBHS to better build our communities to adapt to that low intensity surface fire that we know is important for our forests. Not only can firefighters get in front of a low intensity surface fire, defensible space and home hardening and that effective and safe response is really important for our communities to protect themselves from a fast-moving grass fire. So upfront work is really the most important thing we can do.
Great. And just for the sake of time, I'll ask my two following questions. What would happen if you lost millions of dollars for prescribed fires and then also for firefighter training?
Obviously, that would increase risk to our community. There's no other way to say it. If we can't maintain our treatments with prescribed fire, I mean, our natural fire return intervals every couple years. If we don't have the people to put that fire on the ground and maintain those treatments, then our trees are growing back, and we start seeing that risk increase again.
Thank you, Captain Chapman. I yield back.
I think the gentlelady from Colorado, Ms. Bolbert, is recognized for her 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I would echo Ms. Hageman's statements. We have been unable to properly manage our forests for decades now, and it has really prevented us from being proactive when it comes to wildfires. I live in Colorado. We are part of the beetle kill epidemic that is taking place. We have 6 billion standing dead trees in the West, all creating a massive tinderbox. When we have a catastrophic wildfire, it will emit more carbon emissions, according to NASA, in a single day than an entire state having all of their vehicles running 24/7. And this is a real problem, and we have to be proactive in managing our forests. And that really stems to everything. It is the core of everything. When we have unhealthy forests and we have unhealthy watersheds, about 80% of Colorado's municipal water comes from our forests. And to protect that, we must protect our forests. In Colorado, we have really been prey to wilderness areas, these designations that prevent us from managing the roadless rule that contributes to things like the Route Forest Fire and many others. I've been in the air seeing these fires, and you can have all the money in the world, but if you aren't going to actually manage, or if you're prohibited from managing the forest, then we are going to continue to have these catastrophic wildfires. Chief Munsey, with all of the policy that is out there that prevents forest management, which policies would you like to see maybe deregulated in order to properly get to a goal of minimizing catastrophic wildfires before they happen?
I'd like to see the Fix Our Forests Act passed and become national policy, because I think that the CE is allowing us to treat greater areas of critical importance. I'm going to divert just a little bit from your question to go back to the previous comments on the millions of dollars that could be taken away from local government. We recently did a study about where's the money going, because the local, to be honest, I demonstrated in our picture how we solved the bark beetle problem. 1 million trees, 1.1 million trees we were able to pull away. That money doesn't come to us. It's going to other groups that have no accountability. We're not focusing on the outcomes of where the dollars are going. We're focusing simply on what people are saying in the outputs. That money needs to be brought back into the local communities to do actual work. There needs to be technology and dashboards that prove to our citizens that what we're doing is focusing on outcomes so that we can get this work done. So everything you say, I agree with. The process of what we need to do is to have better leadership that's more than just focusing, and I love President Trump's proposal to bring the wildfire agencies together. That's a bold move because there is overlap in what we're doing, but the biggest thing is that we don't have a key decision-making. And when we talk about the national forest, on one end, I have the Angeles National Forest in our jurisdiction. The second end, I have San Bernardino National Forest. There's 2 different forest supervisors, and the same federal policies are interpreted so differently. Leadership is critical. And I think that we need to use technology and artificial intelligence, not only for the permitting process, but to fairly apply the federal policies to allow us to do our job so that we can get into our forests, get into our communities to do meaningful work so that our homeowners can have insurance for their houses, so they can have this expectation that a fire that's originating in the natural resources isn't going to burn into our communities. Thank you.
Yes, and I know President Trump has been focused on cleaning up the forestry, the forest floors and getting those fuels off the ground. And would you agree that those in the timber industry, when they are allowed to go in and harvest timber from our forests, they create roads to get in there? Does that benefit your fire mitigation efforts?
I served on federal incident management teams for well over a decade, and so I've fought fires in forests that allowed the timber industry, and I will tell you unequivocally that the infrastructure that's in place allows us to access these fires. More importantly, a lot of the areas that have had timber harvesting are great places to stop the fire. It's a good place to introduce good fire. It's been extremely helpful having that infrastructure in place. I'm not a forester like Mr. Westerman, but I also understand. But I also understand that, and I watched a recent CNN interview that he did, that he's an outstanding football player and he can weigh in on Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift and the Chiefs. Nice job, sir.
Thank you, Chief. My time has expired. I yield.
I think the gentleman from the full committee, Mr. Western, and the football players next are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Gosar. I hope I'm a better forester than I was a football player. Again, thank you to the witnesses. There's so many questions I've got on this issue, but Mr. Wright, I want to start with you. Last year, had a chance to get out to Orange County and was with Representative Young Kim, and she had kind of a town hall meeting on wildfire. And I saw something there I've not seen in other places. There were people talking about not being able to sleep at night, worried about wildfire. There were people really with some serious concerns about their home, which may be the biggest asset they have, and not being able to get insurance on it. The issue, I think, is much, much greater than what the full country understands it to be. And we know between 2020 and 2022, insurance companies declined to renew 2.8 million homeowner insurance policies in the state of California. All states stopped issuing new insurance in 2022 and increased premiums on existing policies last year by 34%. It doesn't appear this is getting any better anytime soon. If we fail to act, what will happen to the insurance industry and home markets in fire-prone states like California?
Yeah, so first of all, California's primary insurance problem deals with the regulations that have been in place, and they're on a pathway, presumably, to address those elements. And so much of what homeowners across the state, whether or not they have wildfire or not, they have that reality. Those are the companies that you've named in that space. What I can tell you is insurers are looking forward to a day by which the rate adequacy is in place, and they are focused specifically on what does a home look like that has addressed its risk? Has it narrowed the path of destruction? So if wildfire does come blowing in with embers, will they be able to land and extinguish before they move down the road? Homeowners are in that space where they want their home to survive, they want their community to survive, and they want it to be insurable. And I think the actions that we're talking about here address the fuel loads in the wildland and ensure that when fire approaches and it comes into the community, we're not seeing the conflagration of home after home lost.
Yeah, and that I think of it as triage. We've got to address the wildland-urban interface. We've got to address transportation corridors, transmission corridors, watersheds. It's a vast problem that took decades to happen, but we've seen results of how good management practices work. And Captain Chapman, we were bumped into each other in the elevator this morning. We're recounting years ago, I made a trip out to Flagstaff, and we saw some forest management there. Can you describe the benefits of those thinning projects? And what kind of forest do you have left? Did something get clear cut and paved over, or what happened there?
Thank you for the question. I think I can describe it well. Avoiding, we could easily talk about basal area and canopy cover, but the homesteaders in the Flagstaff area said they could take a horse and a carriage at a trot through the forest at all times. That's how open, and it was just full of these big fire-tolerant trees. It changed and it filled in, and now we have hundreds of trees per acre. So exponential increase in density. We have proven over and over again, when we go in and we restore that natural structure and pattern of a fire-adapted ponderosa pine forest, that we can keep the fire on our terms. Even on red flag, windy days, when a fire starts in a spot that's either had prescribed fire or a thinning treatment and prescribed fire, or in an area where we've had a beneficial wildfire, we can control that fire. We can keep it out of the community, and we can steer it in a positive way.
And keep the forest intact.
And the forest stays healthy, exactly. And so really, having all of those things in alignment is so important for us to protect our communities, protect our first responders, and get those treatments on the ground, and doing it in a cross-jurisdictional way, because as we've heard earlier, fire doesn't care if there's a fence line there, it's gonna keep moving.
Yeah. Quickly, Chief Munsey, you put the picture up that showed the road infrastructure from decades ago. Last fall, we took a Codell over to Scandinavia, went to Finland, where they have some of the most, I won't say intense, but most detailed forest management of any place in the world. And they were talking about how they very rarely had problems with fires because of their management and also because of their road network, that if they had a fire, they could get in and put it out. And when I explained to them that if we build a road on the forest in the U.S., we have to just tear the road out after we're through doing the work. And even these Europeans thought we were crazy that we did something like that. We actually spent money to build a road, then we spent money to tear the road out. And we know the roadless rule came into effect, probably targeting my friend Representative Beggich's Tongass forest. It was a way to keep harvest from happening in the Tongass, but it's affected the whole country. And I'm way out of time, but if Mr. Munsey would like to add anything about the roadless issue and how big of an issue that is on not being able to manage and to keep fires under control.
First, I'm grateful for your leadership. I'm also grateful you haven't seen my CNN interviews. You're right. And after the line fire that burned through 50,000 acres, we can clearly see the cornrows where the old roads existed. And we asked our local forests if we can reestablish these roads. We can't because of environmental concerns, and that makes almost no sense. This is what worked for almost a century to keep our fires small. This is the Civilian Conservation Corps from the 1930s that put all those roads in. It is critical that we have early access to these fires. We've got to get there quick. We've had a mindset in the fire service for way too long that we're going to keep wildfires 10 square acres or less 95% of the time. 10 square acres or less 95% of the time. The problem is, what about that other 5% or 10% in some other agencies? These fires are getting huge, and a lot of it has to do with access. The second is these roads can be used as control points. The fire will bump up into it. Having these access allows us to maintain these forests, to introduce good fire as they're doing in Flagstaff so that we can have healthy forests.
Thank you, Chairman Westerman. The gentleman from Idaho, Mr. Folter, is now recognized for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the panel for being here today. And I'd like to start with a question for Mr. Wright, or at least some dialogue, I hope. I come from the great state of Idaho, and we have approximately 34 million acres of federally controlled land in that state. We've got about 2 million people. So what that means is we really don't have a choice sometimes as to where the urban places are placed and how people live and where they live. And we really do have an insurance problem. The federal government is totally overwhelmed when it comes to forest management, and the policies that are in place have not allowed for wise management. And so many of our residential regions have no option when it comes to insurance. And I'd just like to get your feedback. What do we do? How do we mitigate that? Whether it be on the private side, on the federal side. Need some counsel, please.
As you know and have alluded to, so insurance is regulated by each state and territory. So 56 different insurance regimes are in place across the country. And you look in those elements, so your experiences are different than Wyoming, and they're different than Arizona.
Probably not a lot, actually. We probably have a lot of the same similar problems.
Similar problems, but how the insurance is regulated is different from state to state. Fundamentally, insurance on the property side is there to understand what the potential losses are and charge premiums so they can be there on a bad day and pay those claims. I do think we're in a point by which we have to collectively take on these risks. What is particularly hard with wildfire, which is different than some other pieces, is once it gets into a suburban neighborhood, it can move from structure to structure to structure very, very quickly. You have very, very large losses for the insurance companies and the community.
But what about on the federal agency front? Is there some focus that we should be putting there? I mean, on the private side, I can understand whether, regardless of what the local regulation is.
Yeah.
So I'll highlight. Let me finish. A private insurance company is not going to want to take a risk if there's adjacent mismanaged land that puts them at risk.
Two important things that I think Fix Our Forest addresses. First of all, the fuel loads, those dead trees, the kinds of pieces there that can exacerbate the risk have to be addressed. That sits in your state primarily on federal lands. The second piece is when those actions took place, and Mr. Begich spoke about this, having that dashboard that says what mitigation actions took place, where have they been maintained, because the insurance industry needs to have visibility on those pieces. So much of that, it has its potential to be addressed by the Forest Service, by BLM, by others. The community as well as the insurance industry needs to have visibility on what's been done, as well as the flip side, what has not been done.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Munsey, I want to shift to you just for a moment here. Given your expertise, can you cite, from a Western state perspective, any models where federal land managers have had some success in prioritizing the urban versus rural, and how that gets managed? Is there any success stories that you can relay to that might be a good model?
Yes, sir. I'd specifically recommend you look at the Angeles National Forest. The chief one of that forest, Bobby Garcia, is performing at a very high level.
And I'm sorry, where was that?
His name is Bobby Garcia. He's the chief one of the Angeles National Forest. And what surprises me is he works in the same federal regulatory environment. He works with the same for the same bosses within the same budget. He works with the same lawsuits, yet he's able to get things done. And I think that he's an absolute success. I demonstrated in one of my photos how the bridge fire, which occurred in the Angeles National Forest, just east of where the Eaton fire would start months later, the fuel treatments on the bridge fire allowed us to limit that fire. That fire had exponential growth, 34,000 acres in one day, but when it hit this fuel-treated areas, the fire went to the ground. It was a low-intensity fire, and our firefighters were able to pick that up. I look at that as an absolute case study, and I would be happy to send you a report that was developed by that forest on the effects of fuel treatment on large fires.
Mr. Munsey, I would greatly appreciate that. If we can make a note either through staff or directly, I would love to see it. Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I yield back.
Could I just make a real quick comment?
Sure.
Doing the work on the public land didn't move the needle the way we had hoped in Flagstaff. We have homeowners that have thousands of acres of thinning treatments around their land that are still having the exact same insurance challenges that we're talking about here. So it's got to be a combination of both the public land management, which is difficult, but getting into the neighborhoods and doing the built environment work is just as important. We know that we can reduce the fire risk on the public lands through collaborative processes. It's not removing the fire risk. That neighborhood still has to be designed in a smart way to be able to resist a ground fire, not just a crown fire. So it's hoping that if we do the thinning and the effective public land management is part of it. But our experience in Flagstaff is we've done a lot of that around our community. I can look at Google Maps and show you incredible treatment acres we've got around the city, and we're still seeing insurance challenges.
Duly noted. Thank you. Thank you. Yield back.
Thank the gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Hagerman, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I filed a lawsuit in 2001 challenging the roadless rule. I was hired by the state of Wyoming to do that. And there's a few more points that I think are extremely important because, again, this is the source of many of the problems that we're dealing with in terms of forest management. I believe that the roadless rule is one of the most destructive regulations ever adopted in the history of the United States in terms of being able to manage and protect our forests, our watersheds, and our surrounding lands. And in fact, at the time that the roadless rule was adopted, the Forest Service and the Department of Justice defending it knew that it was going to be destructive. And I'll just give you one quote from the attorney who was handling the case in defense of the state, defending it against the state of Wyoming's lawsuit. When we pointed out that there were separate management plans for every forest throughout the United States, that it was inappropriate to treat all roadless areas the same, that a one-size-fits-all approach does not work, especially when you're talking about forest management. I will never forget what the U.S. attorney said when she got up to defend the roadless rule. She said, "We recognize that in certain areas the roadless rule is going to be ecologically devastating." That was the term that she used. ecologically devastating. But it is more important that we have one rule and one regime coming out of Washington, D.C. to manage these acres than protecting local particular areas. When I went through the administrative record, one of the things that I focused on were the comments that were received by the local foresters, the good men and women who actually work in the states, work in the national forests. They submitted thousands of comments, the vast majority of which opposed the roadless rule, and what they said is, please, please do not do this to us. Please do not prevent us from being able to manage our national forests. Please do not do this. We are going to have horrific insect infestations, and we are going to have catastrophic forest fires. You are going to destroy the resource if you adopt the roadless rule. Keep in mind, the national forests are 192 million acres strong. They were created within the Department of Agriculture. They are supposed to be managed as a commodity for a continuous supply of timber and a continuous supply of water. They are not a national park, and they are not within the Department of Interior. So the adoption of the roadless rule, again, is why we are facing this circumstance. The Fix Our Forest Act, which passed the House, expanded the permissible use of the Good Neighbor Authority to include reconstruction, repair, and restoration of roads on non-U.S. Forest Service lands to support forest management projects, and it did a whole variety of other things. And I'm very, very pleased that our panel today seems to be unanimous in supporting our Fix Our Forest Act. Mr. Weiner, I would like to refer to you. It is my understanding that there are some in the Senate who have proposed removing certain aspects of this bill. Could you please speak to the benefit of the authority that I just described that is expanded in the Fix Our Forest Act, and what that would do to our ability to have active management?
Yeah, around Good Neighbor Authority?
Yes, please.
Yeah, Good Neighbor Authority is a really important tool to help build capacity for states to do some of this work on the ground, state and local partners, right? And I think that even if you take a step back from the current funding and workforce crisis that we're facing right now at the Forest Service, we're nowhere near on track to meet our goals. We need to come up with creative ways to fund these kinds of projects, and expanding Good Neighbor Authority is critical to doing that.
I appreciate that. And Chief Munsey, from your duty to provide community protection, can you explain why access to the ignition point is critical and how good roads and infrastructure enable this capability?
Yeah, it's a simple answer, is that fires are going to double in size every 4 minutes or so. If we can't make access, these fires are going to continue to grow. Now, there's other things that are important besides access. That's early detection. That's both terrestrial and celestial, such as low Earth orbiting satellites, and I think that this ecosystem is critical. Having the ability to detect wildfires, and an example I can give you is you have a lightning that starts a smoldering fire. It may not produce any smoke. Nobody sees it, but this fire is smoldering, could burn several acres, and then when the wind kicks up and it becomes hotter and drier, now you have a well-established fire. So that early detection is just as critical as that early access. Secondly, is looking at technology on how we suppress wildfires. 2 weeks ago in San Bernardino, we piloted a fully autonomous Black Hawk helicopter with a company called Rain. It used early detection, in this case, cameras using AI to find the fire, and it doesn't have to be visible smoke with some of the spectrums. It automatically launched that helicopter that flew pilotless and dropped water on that fire, doing the fire behavioral modeling, returned, reloaded with water, and made drops. This is the future, early detection, early response, not necessarily humans on the ground, followed by control using robotics, and then truthing it out with boots on the ground, regardless. Even using technology in overgrown forests, using helicopter and aviation, you're not at times going to be effectively able to control fires. You need to get people there, hand crews, heavy equipment there. The only way that we can do that is having good access.
So I very much appreciate those comments. One last thing, I realize that I'm out of time, but I think it's important for everyone to understand. The National Forest Service created the Fraser Experimental Forest in northern Colorado many, many years ago. I believe that it's going on over 100 years in terms of being in operation. And the Fraser Experimental Forest is something that I would recommend everybody study and go see. They have studied everything from water development through forest management. They look at treating the north side of ridges versus the south side, what that does. They have done every study that you can possibly think of in relation to forest management. I don't know how much they do in terms of fire suppression, but in terms of management of the actual resource itself, we have massive amounts of data and information, and we know how to manage these forests effectively. It is things like the roadless rule and bad policies and regulations coming out of Washington, D.C., and an obsession with global warming and climate change that is preventing us from doing this adequately. Please go to look at what the Fraser Experimental Forest has to offer in terms of giving us the tools to better manage these resources. Thank you, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. The gentleman from good old Arizona, Mr. Eli Crane, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this very important hearing today. And I want to thank you guys for all coming to testify. I'm pretty new to Congress myself. I represent Arizona's 2nd Congressional District, which is about 53% of Arizona, to start to educate myself on this very important issue. Over the last couple of years, I've visited timber sales within the district. Just recently outside of Flagstaff, I went and saw a controlled burn, which was very impressive, the professionalism at which you guys were handling that. I also just went to the new sawmill outside of Flagstaff. I was also very impressed with that operation. We've gone to the Ecological Restoration Institute at NAU. My entire staff went there so we could learn more about this issue. And it is a very serious issue. I've had a lot of people in the district tell me they've been very concerned this year with the lack of moisture that we've got. And they feel like we're in a vulnerable situation. And we also have a couple fires right now burning in the district. Mr. Chapman, I want to start with you and thank you for coming, sir. I want to thank you for what you do for Arizona, Northern Arizona communities. As you know, my district includes several areas prone to wildfires, including the Kaibab, the Coconino, Apache Sitgraves, and Tonto National Forests, which are all part of FORFRI. I've seen firsthand the work that is required to properly manage our forests and conduct hazardous fuel treatment. Like I said, I recently went to the new sawmill just outside of Flagstaff, which has already been instrumental in supporting thinning efforts, and I was proud to see how Northern Arizona is more than capable of meeting goals in President Trump's executive order. Mr. Chapman, can you speak to the impact of proactive fuel reduction efforts and how you've seen forest thinning as effective management strategy?
We see it every single day. We really have an incredibly fire-adapted system, and that system and how it burns is really up to us. And the collaborative process that we've established in Flagstaff allows us to, most days, turn a bad fire into not a big deal that you don't hear about because of those fuel treatments that we've done in the woods, because of the collaborative process. Building on Chief Munsey, we now have a really robust network of cameras around the Flagstaff area through a partnership with Arizona Public Service, the Arizona APS, the utility. So we're really trying to check all those boxes on community risk reduction efforts. We do the treatments, we do the monitoring, we do the maintenance, we do the annual collaboration between our first responders. So our state, federal, and local partners, when we get a call and we roll out, it doesn't really matter right away, whether it's Forest Service or city or state land. We get there, we'll deal with that later, and the dispatch centers sort that out. So that collaborative process has been the game changer for us in both response and implementing those treatments and then maintaining those treatments. So thank you for the question and for the kind comments on our work in the community.
Yes, sir. You also mentioned in your testimony that in high-risk areas like Northern Arizona, wildfire risk reduction sees an estimated $7 return for every $1 invested. Some crucial research from Ecological Restoration Institute at NAU. Can you explain how risk reduction funding saves taxpayer dollars down the line?
Absolutely. We can look at some of the treatments around our community. We just heard about the Fraser Experimental Forest. We actually have the first experimental forest in the country in the Flagstaff area, the Fort Valley Experimental Forest. And there's a network of treatments that have taken place around that forest as well. Some of our treatments around the Flagstaff area within FORFRI are starting to actually pay for themselves. They needed to be subsidized for a while before the timber industry that's doing this restoration work could get up to speed and have that capacity. And so it's really a long story. Like I said, FORFRI has been around almost 15 years now to get where we are. But those initial investments in providing the certainty that that the trees will be made available to the industry to do this restoration work has been the game changer, that it's allowing a company like the Restoration Forest Products that you went and visited to invest hundreds of millions of dollars into that facility. So when we actually see per acre boots on the ground, if we're spending, the NEPA, the management, the oversight, all of that work on the federal side, for every dollar that we're seeing of partners go into those projects, we're estimating, and I think it's probably a fairly low estimate because there's all these costs that we just can't calculate, that if we can prevent a $15 million fire with a couple $1,000s worth of subsidies for our treatments, then we're avoiding significant costs and we're staying in a positive space.
Yeah. I know that ponderosa pines are not considered the most valuable timber in the country. And I've talked to constituents and also industry leaders who say that one of their biggest challenges in bringing in private investments to help us deal with some of the fire mitigation efforts is that the Forest Service often doesn't extend them very long leases. So many of them won't come in because the investment just doesn't pencil out. They don't have a long enough access to these forests and to the timber to make their investment pencil. I wanted to get your thoughts on that, if you've heard of that being a problem as well, and if so, what you would like to see from the Forest Service.
Contracting is challenging. How we make sure that we take care of all of our loggers is very important for us. So we may have a family business that a long-term supply over 10 years to them may be 20,000 acres. We've got to make sure they get taken care of. At the same time, we have a big business coming in where a 10-year supply to them might be 200,000 acres. So how do we make sure that all of our workers in this space are being taken care of is challenging. And I think one of the big lessons of Forfry is that a large contract was offered in the early days and it wasn't successful. So I think there's a lot of parts into this challenging process of contracting that need to come together. Sometimes it's finding that assurance of long-term supply at multiple different scales, because the urgency here really is tough. I don't want any losers in the woods. I want them all to be winners. Our family businesses that have been doing this for a long time, the new folks coming in and making big investments, we need them all to be successful. And so figuring out what that right fit is with the contracting process, I don't think we have that figured out yet, but we sure are trying. And because we have that collaborative NEPA that's completed, we have the space to figure this out. So we're in a good position.
Mr. Chairman, will you allow me one more question?
I will.
Thank you.
Be quick.
Can you talk really quickly about grazing and how that can affect fire mitigation?
Targeted grazing, we talked about this in the Wildfire Commission report. It can play a really important role in providing that surface fuel reduction. The opportunity to go into these strategic areas where we know there's these fire pathways where the fire is going to move quickly through these areas. We've done the thinning. We've reduced that crown fire risk. Now we've got a fast-moving grass fire risk. How do we reduce that challenge? And so thinking targeted grazing opportunities could be a really good opportunity for mitigating that grass fire risk.
And that helps our ranchers at the same time, is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. The gentleman from Puerto Rico is going to be recognized for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will probably yield some of that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Across the country, communities are grappling with the devastating impacts of climate-fueled disasters, from wildfires in the West to hurricanes in the Caribbean, to Puerto Rico, where I'm from. In these high-risk areas, we're seeing a troubling pattern. Insurance markets are becoming unstable, premiums are rising sharply, and coverage is increasingly out of reach. Puerto Rico knows this story very well. After Hurricane Maria, we experienced firsthand the collapse of insurance providers and the long-term consequences of underinsurance. As wildfires now drive similar trends in mainland states, it's clear we need national solutions that ensure resilience, affordability, and equity in disaster recovery. Mr. Wright, major insurers have limited or stopped issuing new policies in high-risk areas in the United States due to escalating wildfire risks. Puerto Rico faced similar challenges with insurance companies withdrawing or collapsing after disasters like Hurricane Maria. What strategies can be implemented to stabilize insurance markets and ensure continued coverage availability in these high-risk regions?
I appreciate the question, sir. As we look at these pieces, we need to address the risk fundamentally, when the risk goes down, the price goes down. And I think for many people, not only have they seen the risk increase, but in much of the country, they've seen the value of their homes go up and inflation play out. All of that is also raising the prices that are there. But if you're the customer, you don't know the difference. You just got the invoice. Here's the price that is there. So particularly as we see property values across the country continue to rise, we need to help them reduce the risk. And then insurance companies need to recognize that and show pricing that connects and recognizes those actions.
How could we reduce the risk of hurricanes?
So we can reduce the risk of in terms of the consequence to the built environment. And I'll compliment, as devastating as Hurricane Maria was across your island, in the rebuilding, there's been a tremendous amount of attention to rebuild in ways maybe that can't withstand Cat 5, but can withstand the Cat 2, the Cat 3, the way they're addressing roofs. And so I do think the right kinds of actions have been demonstrated there in Puerto Rico.
All right, thank you. In states like California, investigations have revealed that flawed algorithms used by major insurers contribute to widespread underinsurance among wildfire survivors, hindering recovery efforts. Underinsurance is also an issue in Puerto Rico, where many homeowners lack adequate flood insurance to protect their properties. How can we make sure that insurance models accurately assess risks and provide sufficient coverage in disaster-prone areas?
I think you're highlighting two separate pieces. Let me talk about general property, and then I'll turn to flood. It's a separate piece. It is the responsibility of the homeowner, the agent, and the company to continue to pay attention to how the value of properties have increased. The real piece about underinsurance is someone whose home was worth $700,000 5 years ago, it grew in value. It's now worth $900,000. Did they continue to adjust their insurance coverages to that point? That really needs to be in all of the above place. As you may be aware, I spent a number of years as the chief executive of National Flood Insurance with FEMA. There's more flaws than we quite know what to do with in that program. But on the underinsurance side for them, they have a ceiling. They don't offer more than $250,000 worth of structural coverage. That's been mandated by Congress. It hasn't been changed since 1994.
All right, thank you. Captain Chapman, in your testimony, you note that the Forest Restoration Initiative has leveraged over $188 million in timber industry investments and $54 million from partners while maintaining strong community and ecological safeguards. What message does this send about the value of long-term planning in the case of a natural disaster?
You know, I think it sends a message that it works. It's worth the investment. I'll admit I was a skeptic in the early days of Forfry, and those very early NEPA meetings were pretty rough. And but at the end, when we got through the objection processes, we kind of became a family, and it was really important for all of us that had different perspectives, and we still had a shared mission at the end: keep our forests from burning down, protect our communities. And I think that collaborative process, you know, it really is worth it. And that's how we can do the good work that we have in front of us now, is because of the hard work we put in to get to that collaborative space.
Right. Well, thank you, and thank you all for all the work that you do and for your openness in answering our questions today. I yield back. I yield back the 5 minutes that I have left.
The 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for yielding your time, Congressman Hernandez. So I just want to note for my future reference, as well as hopefully this committee's, that this has been a remarkably bipartisan discussion, and I think the panel is in pretty uniform agreement that there are a lot of things we could be doing better, and certainly there are things we've done that maybe needs to go back and be fixed. So really appreciate that and look forward to working together with my committee partners. Captain Chapman, thank you for your service and for your expertise. Your perspective on how to collaboratively manage forests across the board has been really helpful, and I'm grateful for your data-driven, experience-proven perspective. Where should the federal government focus our resources and policy work to optimally support solutions like you have been speaking to in Flagstaff on landscapes, air quality, built environment, insurance reform? Like, where do you think the highest yield is for our work?
Well, I've got 148 ideas. We put it in the commission report.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning.
But, you know, I think for our community in Flagstaff, maintaining our investments and our partnerships with our Forest Service partners is key. We've got a lot more work to do. We're kind of just getting close to having some targets accomplished at a meaningful scale with both our thinning and our burning, and we need to maintain that. We're kind of on that knife's edge. You know, a couple bad years where we don't quite get the support that we need to be able to award the acres that the industry needs to stay steady could be devastating for us. But also looking at our built environment, we've had millions of dollars come in to get us where we are with the natural environment. We do not have that kind of capacity to do the work in the built environment right now.
Great. And thank you for mentioning the commission's report, because I also heard one of my colleagues mention that there was uniform support for the Fix Our Forests Act. What I heard is that we brought some of the recommendations in, and so I would guess that there might be some work to do yet on that act, if in your opinion, is that accurate?
Correct. The Senate version, I think the count was about 50 of the recommendations, so almost a third of the report were included in the Senate version.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Weiner, thank you also for being here and for your perspectives. What are some of the current barriers to getting communities to invest in the kinds of mitigation measures that you've been speaking to?
Yeah, from the federal perspective, we've had a couple. One is that communities have needed to have a community wildfire prevention plan in place before they could be eligible for funding from the Community Wildfire Defense Program, a program that, while well-intended, had some serious shortcomings in terms of implementation. The Fix Our Forest Act would remove that requirement. That was a roadblock to Los Angeles being able to use that funding. And there are additional changes to the bill that would, or to that program that would allow them to use it for the built environment and for adoption of technology, like some of the technologies that Chief Munsey and Captain Chapman mentioned earlier.
Great, thank you. And Chief Munsey, is someone leading efforts across a large and diverse county, how are you working to scale community-wide mitigation practices, especially in those high-risk WUI areas?
It's a part of the ecosystem that's required to protect our communities. Fire safe councils, fire-wise communities, engagement, education, working with the local municipalities. We have, I think, 66 different communities within our jurisdiction, but making sure the rules and regulations are in place that make sense, the enforcement of those are all important in this conversation.
Great. And not lastly, since I have extra time, thanks to our chair, Captain Chapman, you served in we've talked about the commission, and it was established, I'll just note for the record, by the IIJA. Some of the commission's proposals for comprehensive wildfire resilience are reflected in the Senate version, as you've spoken to. How essential is it that Congress provide dedicated funding to ensure these programs are not just created on paper, but they are fully operational and impactful?
You know, it's not going to happen without that. I really think that establishing the programs and giving them the capacity to implement the work is so important, and really building off the success that we've seen at the local level and taking that nationally, for example, with our clean air program, and really looking at how we scale up the success that we've been having. And without the long-term investments and capacity in those programs, then we're just going to have people going to meetings.
No, I really appreciate that, and I think it's going to be something that this committee will be struggling with, as funds are always in short supply. Also, Captain Chapman, based on your work with the Forest Restoration Initiative, would you agree that NEPA, when properly resourced and implemented, can support landscape scale forest restoration?
That's absolutely been our lesson. I understand the challenges in other places where they have not been able to overcome those challenges, and I'll be honest, it's local. I don't have the answers, but I know we had people that were struggling to find compromise, and over time we were able to get there, and we certainly have some lessons learned to share with other communities if they're interested. But yes, I think that's exactly what we've been able to demonstrate, that we get behind a common need, and we were able to get that NEPA done.
Very good. And Mr. Chair, I'm just assuming I'm going to 7 minutes. Is that correct, to use my time? Okay, thank you. I'm not going to go over that, I promise. Chief Munsey, we've heard that many red card positions such as incident commanders, wildfire agency administrators, and strike team leaders have been eliminated at the Forest Service. Can you explain what a red card position is and why these roles are so critical to national wildfire response and coordination?
Yes, red card is a demonstration that you have the experience and the education necessary to fulfill a position, whether it's operational, logistical, fiscal, or in planning on large-scale incidents. So the red card is a national system. As you progress as a firefighter, you're taking classes, you're opening task books, you're going on incidents, you're working with a mentor who's signing off that task book to demonstrate that proficiency. It takes many years for a firefighter to achieve incident commander. There's different levels of incident commanders, type 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in order. A type 1 incident commander may take you 20 years in your career of dedicated work to be able to receive that certification.
Thank you. And Captain Chapman, as a pulmonologist, I was particularly struck by your comments on the Clean Air Program in Flagstaff. Can you share how coordination between state and local actors has been structured to ensure that program's success?
Yes, and real quick, just mentioning about the questions about qualifications. The Wildfire Commission called out the time to competency that Chief Munsey just mentioned, that it's concerning to get some of the qualifications that we need to see people have. It's taking us too long. We've got to accelerate that process somehow to get people those skills. We're not in any way saying we want to diminish those qualifications. We just need to help people get there faster.
Let me interject on that real quick. There's been a change in the incident command system to what we call SIMSI, or Complex Incident Management System. And this is the U.S. Forest Service, because they don't have qualified people, changing the system to allow people to move up quicker. The second point I want to make, that on incident management teams, when I first started, there was maybe 30% representation from local government, 70% from the federal agencies. That has now flipped. Local government is providing a lot of these positions, including complex incident management, the top layer, because there's been a degradation in these positions. Thank you.
The coordination with our Clean Air Program has been great. Working with our county public health department and our Forest Service partners, basically, we've been finding the funding to put these tools out into the community, and then working with them to identify the right places to put them. For example, the air sensor monitoring, if you go onto the purpleair.com network, you can see where we've started placing these sensors, both indoor and outdoors around the community. And really, they're not regulatory monitoring, it's social monitoring. When we get a call from a concerned member of our community and they say, hey, I know you guys are doing important work out there with a prescribed burn, but there's a lot of smoke in my neighborhood. Is there something I can do? When I tell them, well, we have a permit from the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, that's not a level of service that I think meets their need.
Yeah.
And so being able to provide them with an indoor air filter and just the assurance that, hey, we've got a sensor in your neighborhood, it looks like it's going to be at this level for a couple hours. We can give them the assurance that we're tracking the intensity and the duration of that smoke. It's really important. Working with the EPA in the program of the public health part of the Wildfire Commission was just a transformative process for me, because I used to think, this work's really important. We just need to do it. Stop getting in our way. And then I realized that, the work that we're doing is really important, and we just need to be better at communicating what we're doing. We need to be better at providing solutions to mitigate the impacts to the communities that we're working in. And we can't just say it's too important to do that. We need to equalize the impact of our work in both spaces.
No, I really appreciate that. And, flagging for kids not to be outside doing practice during that time and just giving people that information makes a huge difference in their health. So last thing, Mr. Chair, just ask for unanimous consent to enter some 4 items into the record. I'll submit those to you.
Without objection,
Thank
so
you.
ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I
And
yield
now
back.
going to go to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Kim, for her 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Gosar and Ranking Member Dexter, for holding this hearing and allowing me to wave on. Thank you so much. And I also want to thank all of our witnesses for joining us today. Chief Munsey, good to see you. I want to thank you and all those who are on the front lines for your services. Thank you. As you know, I represent California's 40th district, which is Southern California, that includes the counties of Orange, San Bernardino, and Riverside counties. So I know all too well how devastating these fires are. The airport fire that in my district that burned over almost 24,000 acres in the Santa Ana Mountains last September was devastating, and we're still recovering from it. Chief Munsey, as you know, the San Bernardino County has a lot of federal land. And I would like to know more about the roadblocks that you have faced when it comes to working with both the state of California and the federal government on wildfire prevention, the management, and the recovery efforts. So in your opinion, could you talk to us about how the local communities and stakeholders can better convene with state and federal land management agencies so we can better prepare for wildfire and forest management, having those discussions?
I think it's likely if the Palisades in Eaton hadn't occurred, we'd probably be sitting here talking about the airport fire, which was burning in conjunction with the line fire and the bridge fire, which are both in our jurisdiction at the same time. And there was really, it was a very complex environment that we're competing for resources. And at one point during the bridge fire, as fire burned in our communities, I had to empty every single one of our fire stations out, every one of them, to go into the community of Wright, Mount Baldy, protect those houses. And that was very hard for me as local government because now there is no 911 system. One of the complex cities that we have right now, specifically to the federal government, is the workforce. There's been a lot of retention issues, and some very highly qualified people have left to go get jobs that provide for their families better. Frankly, CAL FIRE has attracted a lot of them. So we see a lot of acting positions, people that may be in the position but do not have the authority to make the decisions. And we see new faces a lot. It affects us with our qualification system, and as I've mentioned, the transition of having, in the incident management teams, having a large federal presence to much greater local presence. It transitions to the fire stations. In my jurisdiction, only 12 of the 25 fire stations were staffed last year, 12 out of 25, which puts a burden on local government. We respond to 8,533 calls per year into federal lands without compensation. It's the seasonal workforce instead of permanent workforce. These are things that I think that are on the table that really affect us with local government. When it comes to actually working with our neighbors, it really depends on the forest and the supervisor on how much are they going to work with their local partners. Often they focus on maybe legacy projects that somebody proposed a decade or more and put all their efforts on these projects that may not adequately protect our communities. They focus on maybe some political projects.
I want to get to some other issues too, so if you don't mind, Chief Munsey. Yeah, you know that I introduced the bill, Wildfire Technology Demonstration, Evaluation, Demonstration, and Optimization, or the DEMO Act. That was already included in the Fix Our Forest Act, and the intent of that bill is to create a pilot program to allow the private entities who are working on developing wildfire technologies to partner with the federal land management, and they will be able to test their technologies at scale. So I want to talk about how the industries, like Mr. Weiner, can you answer this question? As an industry insider focusing on wildfire science and technology innovation, what are some of the emerging technologies that you think are promising in helping with the wildfire mitigation?
Yeah, so, excuse me. I think that what we're seeing is an explosion of innovative ideas at every phase of fire. So there's no one, but there's a lot of options out there to help us deal with this problem. Chief Munsey and Captain Chapman both mentioned early detection being really critical. There are a lot of novel solutions out there coming out that can help us act on a fire and have better situational awareness right away. The other piece of this is advanced AI-enabled modeling, right? So that we can actually understand fire behavior, what's happening on the ground, and how a fire is likely to behave, and to get us to a potential world where as a fire ignites and we rapidly detect it, we can make decisions in near real time about how we need to respond to that fire, where it could be potentially a good fire and we could let it burn, or where it could pose a threat to structures of the environment and we need to act quickly. We also see a lot of innovative technologies in rapid suppression, whether it's autonomous aviation like RAIN. I know they have a demonstration plan in your district. And then looking at mastication, robotic mastication, and other tools like that too to help us do mitigation work at scale.
Do you see any policy reforms that is needed that you like to see so we can encourage public-private partnerships and ensure that all levels of government, local, state, federal, and fire agencies are using all of those innovative tools made by companies like yours?
Yes, so we would love to see, we're strongly supportive of your pilot demonstration project legislation, and we'd like to see it continue to be expanded. We're working with our colleagues in the Senate to see if we can expand it to have a role for deployment as well there, right? To see if the federal government can actually use these tools at scale, because we're at the point where a lot of these technologies have been demonstrated. Now we just need to get them into the field of the people who need them, right? And so that's a big piece of this. And then also increasingly creating dedicated pots for advanced and innovative wildfire technology is really important. Right now, a lot of wildfire tech gets eaten up in the IT budget. It's shared with the Microsoft Office renewal every year, right? And so I think that the committee has an opportunity to look at creative new funding pots where we can let people deploy these technologies without having to compete against other necessary IT prerogatives.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My time's up, and I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now it's my turn. Okay, Mr. Munsey. So I live on the end of a cul-de-sac. It's not me, I don't live at the end of a cul-de-sac. I live out in the woods, and three sides of this person's house has got Forest Service on there. And they just got their bill. In fact, they don't have a bill because they're being dropped because of the Forest Service not being taking care of their properties around them. Do you think that's fair?
No, I think it's bullshit.
Thank you. How would you approach that?
As a landowner,
Yep.
well, I'd go to the local forest and I would explain the problem, and I would see that if I could work with them to do some land management on their jurisdiction, I would offer it for free, knowing that they actually can't accept that. But I would probably do it in writing and then send it to the local newspaper to say, my insurance is being canceled. I'm working hard on my own private property. Look what I've done. I have fire resistant, I've met zone 0. I've managed my land, but I no longer can afford here. And probably in your cul-de-sac, this is generational people that have lived on this property. So while we've lived here for 100 years in harmony with the natural resources, we no longer can do it because of the cost. But I would get that in writing and go public on it, because frankly, at the end of the day, I don't think that we're going to get the forest to take action to mitigate or do treatment to protect that particular landowner.
Thank you. Kevin Chapman. And so in Flagstaff, we almost had to learn our bad lesson before we learned our good lesson, right? We almost lost Flagstaff. If it had crested that hill over there south of Little America, we would have had lost the town. So when we say mitigation, it's biodiversity different from each type of tree, right? Each forest is very different, right?
Correct.
So is it more the floor, the problem in Arizona, or is it more the limbs, dead limbs, or the saturation of trees together that are the problem?
Oh, we got lots of problems. It's all those things combining together. This is really where, I think our specialty within our capacity within our program, we are standing in a driveway talking to that homeowner, and each parcel, each driveway has different challenges. It might be the open space behind them that needs some treatment. It might be their own property. And really the solution here has to be comprehensive. We have to have that combination of the risk reduction on the natural environment, so going in and doing the thinning in the forest, reducing the ladder fuels, reducing the tree connectivity, so if there is a fire, it stays on the ground. But at the same time, making sure that homeowners is doing the work they need to do on their property. And it is challenging, because we have folks that they're surrounded by treatments, they've done the work on their property, and they're still running into those insurance challenges. So it can't just be one solution. It's got to be a combination. It's going to have to be a combination at scale. And I fear that scale is probably going to be multiple states. That's what it's going to take to look at some of these models and say that risk has been mitigated in a way that actually changes some of the math on these maps. So it's got to be a combination of these solutions, and really it starts at the parcel level.
Mr. Wright, from the insurance industry, how would they have access to this information if a landowner is actually doing their job?
So it is, some of it is based on aerial kind of information that they can obtain, and so much of it happens based on what is reported from the homeowner along with documentation from them. They don't simply say, hey, tell me it's true. The insurance company wants to see the pictures to prove that it's true.
So AI and some of this Google Earth, like for example, really should be beneficial to the insurance industry.
It absolutely is. And today, it still has probably two principal limits I'll speak of. First of all, it's showing you the top down. It's not as easy to see the diagonals, which allow you to see the resolution up closest to the house. Progress is being made there, but that's an element where we're still reliant on the individual homeowners or others to put boots on the ground. The second piece is as much progress has been made on wildfire modeling and the kind of progression of fire behavior. One of the most difficult pieces is once it gets to start burning structures. The embers created by structures are even more lethal. When the motherboard from the TV is on fire and flying, when the hose from the dishwasher is picking up and flying, look at those kind of elements, particularly in those high wind events. That's a place where the modeling and the AI still has a ways to go.
Gotcha. Mr. Chapman, so the advent of new materials that are very flame resistant, I know of one now that's basalt. Man, they actually can weave it, believe it or not, and they can make panels that are both bulletproof and fireproof. How would that advent change that whole aspect that you would look at as far as fire?
The innovative building materials are a game changer for us. This also aligns with potentially some of our small diameter wood utilization strategies around Flagstaff as well. So really looking at this challenge, we're spending time with our community development folks and our building folks within the city. It's not just the fire department that's responsible for fixing these things, because we can have partners that come up with wonderful new construction ideas, and if we can't get that built into our code, we're going to run into some challenges. So really working across all these different disciplines and being supportive of new building construction innovations is going to be very important for us.
Thank you. I'm going to save my next time until after. The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins, is recognized for his 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate y'all being here today. I want to start out by saying that I grew up. My parents are in the trucking business, and we hauled logs for a living. And so, from this aspect, especially from forestry lands, I've been affected by the fact that they changed how they sold off timberland. They always said they had timberland for sale in our national forest, but they would sell them on such small plots that it didn't make it profitable for anybody to actually go in there and log it. And so I want to focus on some things here with Georgia. As a matter of fact, Mr. Weiner, I'd love to start with you. Georgia has faced a substantial increase in wildfires just this year. More than 1,600 fires, burning upwards of 14,000 acres. And that's a 20% increase on fires and 50% more land that has been burned just this year over a 5-year average here for Georgia. You have said that federal and state agencies' emphasis on fire suppression has led to dangerously high fuel loads in our woodlands, especially those near woodland-urban interface communities. In fact, the Forest Service has recently warned that the public that even rainfall only slightly moderates fire conditions in areas like the Chattahoochee-Oconee National Forest. How has a strategy of reacting to fire rather than proactively managing our lands led to these extremely hazardous conditions?
Well, thank you, sir. I live in Tennessee, so we've noticed a growth in wildfire risk there, and I will say that the fire exclusion regime that we've had for over 100 years of putting out fires before they necessarily need to be put out, obviously we did that for important reasons in a lot of cases, has left us with a landscape that cannot adapt to fire in this new reality, right? And so what we need to do is get into a proactive posture to get in there and manage the forest more effectively. I think this is increasingly important in states with emergent fire risk, like Georgia, right? We have states like California, Oregon, and others have been dealing with this problem for a really long time and have had the benefit of being able to learn from their mistakes, learn from their successes, and build a system over decades. Other states are going to have to jump a lot of hurdles really quickly to catch up, and so I think this presents an opportunity for us
Well,
to
in
do
that nature, then how do we educate the public just about the importance of federal forest management so that they can get in on making sure that we're doing practices like thinning and prescribed burns?
Yeah, I think part of it is helping people understand that not all fire is bad. The Southeast region is very good at prescribed fire in a lot of ways compared to the rest of the country. So it's funny, when I'm down in the South, we hear from a lot of folks who are much more comfortable with the idea of prescribed fire than we do out in the West. Yeah. But generally speaking, we need a new approach to Smokey Bear, if you will, that we need more fire on the ground. Not all fire is bad, and we need to embrace that.
Right, thank you. Chief Munsey, you wrote in your testimony that as a firefighter, I often question why we wait for wildfire destruction before taking action. Why do we wait for wildfire destruction before taking action?
Well, I think it's the local government, we are taking action. And so in reference to that quote, I was really looking at the line fire on the National Forest. And I demonstrated just before that in the 1930s, the road, the network was there, the control lines were there, but because of policies, those roads were reclaimed by vegetation.
Well, in your 2003 project to remove hazardous timber and unmanaged fuels within forest areas, what federal agencies did you coordinate with, and why'd you pick those?
Yeah, nearly all of them, but the U.S. Forest Service was the biggest partner. The EPA, we actually had written an EPA grant based on air quality to be able to do that work, which was helpful. Fish and Game, certainly, and Army Corps of Engineers.
Okay. What challenges did you face in coordinating with those agencies, if any, and were they resolved, or how were they resolved?
So we were able to, at the time, have a declaration of federal emergency, which really helped us get through some of those challenges, but then taking an interagency approach. What was interesting is local government took the leadership on this role because it wasn't clearly defined who was going to take the leadership from the federal or the state. The biggest challenge was bringing everybody together and then cutting through the bureaucracies. I think we did 10,000 different plots in order to remove 1.1 million trees. Initially, every federal agency needed to be on site. They needed to inspect the plots. Eventually, we were able to defer some of that authority to other agencies. We were quickly able to go through the different processes, the regulatory environment. I think today we can do it even better and more efficient with using technology. To the insurance, looking at the top down, there's technology that can use AI that you can stand, an individual can stand, a homeowner can stand with their camera, and AI can tell you what good looks like and verify that for the insurance industry. Why could we not do that same thing for the permitting process?
Right. So what would you say you were able to accomplish in that project?
We saved our forests. When you go and you look at the San Bernardino National Forest now, you don't see a bug kill. 1.1 million trees and millions of tons of biomass were taken away over a 10-year period. It took an immense amount of leadership. The gentleman that ran that program, I've now brought back to, and earlier described an interagency approach to land management. I've asked him to lead that approach and then teach the newer generation, and then institutionalize it by policy into who we are, not just local government, but state and federal government, so that we maintain that rhythm so 20 years doesn't go past and now we're in the same environment we were.
So y'all are still continuing the project, the coordination with the agencies?
That particular project ended in 2010. Today, 15 years later, we're starting to see the overgrowth that led to that bark beetle kill. Okay. The trees per acre is a large reason why that occurred.
I'm sorry, I didn't run out of time, and I forgot we're voting. I yield back. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from California, Mr. Fung, recognized his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the witnesses for being here. Unfortunately, megafires are not new to me nor my community. In 2021, in the Central Valley of California, the KNP complex fire decimated some of the last remaining giant sequoia groves in and around the Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park. These trees thrive with fire, but the sheer force and unnatural scale of this megafire proved to destroy even the most resilient, oldest trees in the world. So building off the Fix Our Forests Act, I introduced the Save Our Sequoias Act to spur the aggressive forest management we need to protect our remaining forests. One of the main sections of this bill declares an emergency to streamline resources. If I could ask Mr. Weiner, how would more expanded emergency declarations help spur forest management? And are there other creative ways to achieve our forest treatment goals in an expedited manner?
Yes, I mean, I think we can read the writing on the wall here and see that Governor Newsom and President Trump, both within the same weekend, announced new emergency authorities to do landscape scale treatments because executives who are in charge, regardless of party, understand that they need to cut through red tape to get at this problem. And sequoias is a really good example of how we've been able to yield results very quickly. They were able to treat about 50% of the groves in the 3 years now since emergency authorities were announced to help them move forward. Right, and that's something that is absolutely replicable elsewhere and is a real success story.
Thank you for that. To Mr. Wright, the Burrell Fire was the largest fire in Kern County's history. And I'm proud to represent that area, and devastated wildland-urban interface communities in my district in the summer of 2024, including the complete destruction of the town of Havilah. Because these communities are small and rural, they did not meet the minimum damage threshold for FEMA aid. At the same time, insurance rates in California are not attainable, which I'm sure you're aware of. With more and more companies eliminating policies or leaving the state altogether, it leaves our residents with little options besides the California Fair Plan, which is extremely expensive and it lacks the true coverage needed for homeowners. If I can ask you, for states like California and probably other states who hopefully will not follow our path, where the insurance market is struggling, how do we motivate insurance companies to re-enter the state and re-enter the market and create more sustainability in the insurance space?
As you well know, Prop 103 in California created more complexities in the property insurance market than any other place in the country. While I'm hopeful that what Commissioner Lara, the insurance commissioner, has announced, he'll be able to follow through and meet those pieces, ultimately, there needs to be a reset in the market and to bring more folks back. And then we also need to help the homeowners take the actions on their homes so that they are more attractive risk.
I understand that California is the last state to kind of allow for reinsurance and catastrophic modeling. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, California, for various reasons that I won't go into the minutia of, didn't allow the price of reinsurance, had limited on what could be done on modeling. Commissioner Lara had made some announcements, and they're starting to begin the implementation. It's ironic that as many things as California might lead the country on this front, it's been at the back of the train.
I appreciate that. Mr. Munsey, during the Burrell Fire, many others that have impacted, and along with other fires that have impacted our communities over the last few years, we've seen that the Forest Service has been hamstrung with its aerial firefighting capabilities by requiring firefighting aircraft to be monitored by another spotter aircraft. I wanted to get your perspective on how the Forest Service could be better in enacting safety measures that would allow for more successful deployment of aerial resources for fire suppression.
Aviation's probably the most dangerous thing that occurs on a wildfire, and aviation coordination's critical. And so I'm not against having a lead plane or an air attack. I think these are very important concepts. Specifically, I think where you hear the objective from local government is the ability to use night flying helicopters on federal instances. This past year, the Vista Fire is a great example where we had night flying helicopters that were available, but because we didn't have a helicopter coordinator that was a state or federal employee, these nighttime critical resources were not able to fly. We did have a local government qualified carded HELCO, and they weren't being used. I called the U.S. Forest Service, our local forest, and I volunteered to pay out of my local budget to have that HELCO coordinator that could fly to take action on federal land or keep that fire small so it wouldn't spread to our local communities. It took 3 days in order to fill that position. Ultimately, they didn't charge me. They did the right thing, but that was very frustrating to us.
I appreciate that. I know, and seeing in my community, time is of the essence in terms of addressing these. So I'd love to partner with you and get more information. My time has run out, so I certainly will yield back to the chairman.
Thank you very much. I got a quick question for you. Federalism. You know, we are supposed to have consultation with local governments, county supervisors, Native American tribes. How important is that to making your decision, Mr. Munsey?
I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about because I don't know that I see that level of coordination occur.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. How about you, Mr. Chapman?
We have that coordination.
And it's been very interesting, right? It's been very collaborative. It's not what Flagstaff expected, was it?
Oh, I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, its evolution was very different. And it's not what Flagstaff had expected, but it's really turned out very well, has it not?
I would agree. It's, you know, I can call up our state and federal partners at any moment, and we're on the same page. We have coordination calls and coordination exercises, and we've got a pretty good model of all of us working together, yes.
That's way cool. So now I'm going to take a little different stance. Assets that you look at when you're fighting fires. Now, in Flagstaff, Mr. Chapman, you have Snowball, right? Do you think that's an asset or a hindrance?
I would say it's an asset considering the water supplies that are up there and the fact that it is basically fire breaks in a wilderness, surrounding a wilderness area, yes.
You know, the fact that it's got produces snow really is an asset, I look at. You know, because it takes a while for the snow to melt, and so it delays that season a little bit, and it also helps to replenish our aquifers a little bit better, doesn't it not?
It sure does. It also puts a lot of values at risk in an area that, you know, is challenging because of the topography for fire response.
That's way cool. Well, being one of the original people that was doing the fry and working with Tom Tidwell, I tell you what, we spent a lot of time, but we smile when we think about the process. So now my last question for each one of you. What was the question that you wanted asked? What was the question? And what was the answer to it that was not asked? We'll start with you, Mr. Munsey. What was the question that you were prepared to ask or to answer? What is it and what's its answer?
That's a good question. I'm going to go back to the coordination real quick. Yes, we absolutely have coordination with the federal government on emergency incidents, and I would say very strong. When it comes to land management coordination, I think that that's been lacking. We aim to fix it, and I'm really happy with what I'm hearing in Flagstaff. It comes down, though, I think, to the local supervisors of the forest and the direction that they give. That's apparent to me. What's the question that I want to ask? I think it's more the recognition that I would like you to understand is that in local government jurisdictions, it's your local firefighters that are responding to these incidents, often arriving before the federal government, that are taking action and mitigating these incidents. I want you to recognize that it's more than just wildfire. It is all hazard, that our national forests and our public lands can be very dangerous. As we move forward in combining the federal agencies, and I do think that's a good idea, and I generally support it, there is going to be some redundancies going to be eliminated. And I think the importance of local government in supporting the federal government and their mission cannot be underscored. But for too long, there hasn't been adequate agreements in place that recognizes local government's contribution to supporting the federal agencies in their time of need. And I think that that's an important issue that needs to be addressed.
Mr. Wright?
Probably something down the line that if the land management agencies did everything right, what else needs to be done? And I think we need to address the failure of imagination of people who live in the neighborhoods, because even when everything goes right, wildfire can make it to the edge of the community, and as soon as the first structures are burning and you've got a high wind day, it's going to keep going. And over and over and over again, I walk into communities right after these conflagrations and people go, I just never thought this could happen. And while none of us probably thought about the scale of it, we know what happens when a fire gets in. And both of the chiefs have spoken to elements of addressing the wildland and the attack on that side. But homeowners and neighborhoods have to do things so that they can withstand those wildfire embers when they invade their community.
Mr. Chapman?
think you guys did a pretty good job covering a lot of the questions I was worried about. But one of the ones that didn't come up directly is potentially how can a committee or just a federal organization support our local fire departments and our fire districts in a more effective way when it comes to wildfire response. And one of the recommendations in the commission report that I point to a lot was the one about empowering the U.S. Fire Administration to play a larger role in this space. So whether it's their granting abilities through a couple of their granting processes or just increasing the level of training and opportunities specifically for fire departments and fire districts. You know, we often plug in wildfire response. We can go on wildfire assignments. Most departments get appropriately reimbursed when they do that work. We don't really have aggressive funding and training opportunities for prescribed fire for local fire departments and fire districts, and that could be an opportunity for the fire administration to play a role in a space like that.
Mr. Weiner?
I was hoping to be asked, you know, if we got every dollar of funding that we need, what would our challenges be the next day? And to me, that is our workforce woes. We cannot fix our forests if there's no one to fix our forests, and I think that can't be overlooked. It's figuring out the bioeconomy piece of this and how we can bring some value off these lands in a meaningful way to help finance this work going forward in a sustainable and responsible way. I think lastly, this is something Chief Munsey touched on. We got to figure out how to bring some rational sense to the way we structure our wildfire response and management at the federal level. We need a unification of services at every level. And beyond that, we need some more accountability. Right now, nobody gets fired when there's a bad fire season because there's 20 other people to point the finger at. And that's a fundamental problem that we need to solve.
Well, I've got to tell you, it's a very spirited debate here. We've had great conversations back and forth. And you know, I got to say, the impressiveness of our panel is incredible. Would you not?
Yeah.
So, you know, we show the practicality on big basis, federal basis, and insurance. Thank you very much for your process. I want to thank the witnesses for their testimony. The chair now recognizes, for their testimony and the members for their questions. Got too excited here. Members of the committee may have some additional questions for the witnesses. I can tell you that they do, and we will ask you to respond to these in writing. Under Committee Rule 3, members of the committee must submit these questions to the subcommittee clerk by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, May 20th. The hearing record will be held open for 10 business days for their responses. If there's no further business, subcommittee is adjourned.